The Civil War left more than just scars on the land. It left echoes. Echoes buried beneath fields soaked in blood, beneath forests that never fully healed. In 1872, a nearly forgotten Union soldier named Elias Finch published a privately printed memoir. It never reached bookstores, never made headlines. It was passed quietly, hand to hand, its spine cracking with age and damp, its pages whispering of things that didn't belong in the official record. Finch's war wasn't the one taught in schools. According to him, there was another conflict, one beneath the war. A war of guardians and secrets, of ancient relics and old-world oaths. And it was fought by men who wore no uniform, pledged allegiance to no flag, and answered only to the silence beneath the earth. For decades, Elias Finch's manuscript was considered either fiction or madness. He described strange gatherings in the woods before major battles. Men with European accents, robed in gray, who spoke in symbols and warned of unsealing what was once bound. He wrote of an incident near Antietam, where an entire Confederate scouting unit disappeared without a trace, except for a single broken sword planted in the dirt, point down, and wrapped in black cloth. Around it, he said, was a ring of scorched earth, though no fire had passed through. He called them the Watchmen, an order older than America, perhaps older than Christendom itself. Their goal, Finch claimed, wasn't to win battles, but to keep something hidden, something buried. Most historians ignored his writing, but not all. In 2009, a researcher named Dr. Marian Rowe from the University of Virginia stumbled across a single reference to Finch's memoir in a Civil War correspondence archive. Curious, she located the last surviving copy in a private estate collection in Maryland. What she found inside changed the course of her life and possibly American history. Among the pages were maps, not of states or battle lines, but of locations marked with unfamiliar coordinates. Ancient sites buried in the American South. Finch wrote that some were older than the tribes, older than the buffalo trails, older than the stone itself. Rowe cross-referenced the coordinates with geological surveys. What she found stunned her. Beneath certain battlefields were unexplained voids, chambers, and one of them, under the Shenandoah Valley, was exactly 144 feet across and shaped like a perfect circle. Was it a coincidence? A trick of terrain? Or had a secret truly been buried beneath the bloodshed? Rowe kept digging. In her notes, she wrote of symbols found in church foundations, in abandoned Confederate bunkers, and even etched into Union belt buckles, faint, spiral-like markings that matched those in Finch's drawings. The deeper she went, the more connections emerged, not just to the Civil War, but to ancient rites, medieval European texts, and secret societies whose names had long since passed into legend. But the most chilling discovery came when Rowe found a letter, not from Finch, but from a Confederate general. It was dated 1864 and addressed not to Richmond, but to Paris. It simply read, "They found the Southern Gate. We cannot hold it through another moon. The keepers must act." Signed, G.T.B. Who were the keepers? What was the Southern Gate? And why, after all these years, do parts of the Shenandoah still echo at night with sounds no one can explain? This wasn't just a war for a nation's soul. It was the final flare of a far older fire, one that had smoldered beneath American soil for centuries. And some believe it's starting to burn again. Dr. Marian Rowe didn't sleep that night. The letter from General G.T.B. pulsed in her thoughts like a drumbeat from the past. The keepers must act. The words haunted her, demanding clarity. But clarity would not come through history books. It would come through fragments, hidden in overlooked corners of the past. The next day, Rowe returned to the Virginia Military Archives, this time requesting access to uncategorized wartime correspondence. Boxes of loose, uncatalogued letters from soldiers and officers sat neglected in a climate-controlled basement. It was in one of those boxes, water-stained and fraying, that she found something remarkable. A letter dated June 1863, addressed from a Union major in Pennsylvania to a Confederate colonel in Georgia. Yes, north writing to south. And at the bottom, stamped faintly in wax, the same spiral surrounded by 4 stars. The contents of the letter were vague but urgent. If the node beneath Harper's Hollow is breached, the balance falls. The gate must not be opened. I trust your men are ready, regardless of uniform. It was signed simply, R. This wasn't the only letter. Over the next 3 weeks, Rowe discovered 12 more, all with variations of the same symbol written across state lines, battlefield lines, and ideological lines. Officers from both sides warning one another about sights, gates, circles, and a mysterious order of silence. And not a single mention in any textbook. What emerged was something more than conspiracy. It was a brotherhood without colors, a secret alliance of officers, soldiers, scouts, and even chaplains who shared one mission: protect whatever lay beneath the American continent. Some letters referred to an arc, others a mechanism, and one in particular mentioned a pattern hidden in the bones of the land. These weren't just metaphors. Coordinates were mentioned, measurements, ritual phrases, and always that same spiral, never explained, never named. The deeper Rowe looked, the more dangerous it became. One of her colleagues, a Civil War antiquities specialist from Georgia, disappeared shortly after receiving a digital scan of a letter from Rowe. He left his phone, wallet, and keys in his office. His laptop, however, was wiped. In her notes, Rowe wrote, "They still watch. Not just over the sights, but over those who look." Back in 1863, another letter was discovered, this time from a Union general referencing a secret gathering near the Smoky Mountains. They call it the Summit of the Pale. I was shown the sigil. They asked if I would bear the oath. I said yes. That night, under stars and symbols, I ceased to be a soldier of war. I became a warden of the gate. The next day, that general ordered his division to retreat from a winning position, a move historians long believed was cowardice or confusion. But now, a new possibility emerged. He wasn't retreating from battle. He was protecting something. Rowe's investigations drew her toward one recurring term: the Southern Gate. Letters warned of it. Diaries circled it in red. And Finch, back in his memoir, had mentioned a sealed door below a ridge in Georgia, a door not meant for any man to open. But it was opened. Once. In the fall of 1864. And whatever came out, according to a Confederate chaplain's journal, moved without sound, without breath, and without shadow. He later wrote, "We closed it, or thought we did, but the land has not healed." Whatever war the Brotherhood without colors fought, it wasn't just for a country. It was for continuity, for the containment of memory so old, it could crack the foundations of belief. And now, fragments of that memory are resurfacing. Rowe's latest findings pointed her to a battlefield outside Chattanooga, an unmarked grave, a soldier buried without name or regiment, but with a medallion around his neck bearing the spiral. Inside his coat pocket, a map, and beneath that map, a key. The grave lay forgotten, shielded by brush and silence. No dates, no regiment, no name, just a stone and the spiral. Rowe had found it with the help of old survey maps and a hunch born from obsession. Beneath the soil lay not just bones, but a clue. A copper medallion clung to the soldier's remains, bearing the spiral, worn thin as breath. Folded into the remnants of his coat was a brittle piece of parchment, a hand-drawn map. The ink, though faded, was legible enough. 3 points connected by lines. Beneath each point, a sigil, one a triangle, another a wheel, the last a stylized eye. What Rowe held in her hands wasn't just a path, it was a pattern. She traced the triangle first, a ridge south of Lookout Mountain. The wheel, a hollow beneath an abandoned church in Pulaski. But the eye, that one pointed west into the Ozark Plateau. And for the first time, the Civil War's shadow met something older. Much older. The Ozarks were a mystery even before the war. Caves that led nowhere, springs that ran warm year-round, and stories of lights in the sky that predated electricity. The spiral had appeared there too, carved into cave walls where no one admitted to carving anything. Rowe contacted an archaeologist named Caleb Boone, whose grandfather had vanished in those same caves in 1958. Boone agreed to help, partly from curiosity, partly from the need for closure. Together they descended into the ridge that locals still called Whispering Gap. Deep underground, behind a collapsed stone wall, they found a room, circular, domed, and impossibly symmetrical. There were no seams in the stone, no signs of tools. Only the spiral, repeating along the walls like a mantra, and in the center, a sarcophagus. The lid bore no markings, but once lifted, with effort and reverence, It revealed something beyond time. No body. Instead, pages, wrapped in oilskin, brittle but preserved. The pages were written in Latin, Old French, and a cipher Boone recognized from medieval Templar scrolls he had studied as a student. The words were a warning, a recounting. One phrase stood out in 3 languages. Custodire portam quae non videtur. Guard the gate that cannot be seen. This wasn't a grave, it was a vault. A Templar vault. Rowe and Boone pieced together the documents late into the night. They spoke of a relic carried from the Levant in the 12th century. Not gold, not holy, but alive in some strange way. Something that had to be hidden, kept from kings, popes, and now generals. And they spoke of an oath, that once it was brought to the New World, it could never leave the soil again. Could this brotherhood without colors be the last surviving cell of an ancient order? One scroll told of a mirror door that could only be opened if the spiral was broken, an act said to release not light, but memory. Boone, skeptical by nature, laughed at the wording. But Rowe saw the link. The gates, the spirals, the symbols beneath battlefields. This was not myth. It was infrastructure. The final map fragment in the parchment led to a location Rowe had seen before, a place mentioned in Finch's memoir. A river bend in Mississippi, near a battlefield destroyed by cannon fire in 1864. The site had long been deemed unstable, prone to collapse, riddled with caves and gas pockets. But now it held a new name. Threshold Delta. It was circled in red, marked not with the spiral, but with a broken spiral. Rose circled it on her own map. She would go, but she knew she would not be coming back the same. They told her not to go. The land had a history. Locals wouldn't fish there. Surveyors refused to stay after dark. In the mid-1990s, a team of geologists mapping subterranean limestone collapsed a shaft and abandoned the site entirely. They called it a sinkhole, but Dr. Marian Rowe knew better. She had read the scrolls, the Brotherhood's letters, and the final map fragment from the vault. Threshold Delta wasn't a sinkhole. It was a scar. She arrived at dawn. The area was overgrown, silent except for the rhythmic churn of river water. Her companion, Caleb Boone, brought sonar equipment and scanning gear. They weren't here to dig, not yet, but to listen. The Earth, as Boone often said, remembers everything. The first scans revealed a cavern, roughly 50 feet beneath them. Circular again. But this time, the pattern wasn't just a spiral, it was fractured. Like something once whole had split apart. Boone's analysis showed that the chamber walls were unnaturally smooth, and something inside was reflective. Not metallic, not liquid, reflective, like glass. Rose's hands shook when she saw the full structure on Boone's tablet. The spiral was open, broken in one section, just as the scrolls warned. When the spiral breaks, the door does not open, it falls. They camped near the bend for 3 nights. At precisely 2:17 a.m. on the second night, Boone's motion sensors triggered. Something moved below, not above ground, beneath them. It was rhythmic, not mechanical, but almost biological. Boone described it as a heartbeat without blood. Then, just before dawn, they found it. Hidden beneath a slab of stone, camouflaged by undergrowth, was a staircase. Rowe and Boone descended carefully, using rope and headlamps. The air grew colder with each step, unnaturally so. And then, 40 steps down, the tunnel opened. The spiral chamber wasn't theory anymore. It was real, perfectly circular, walls seamless. The center held a pedestal. Upon it, a mirrored object, 4 feet tall. No dust, no decay. It reflected their light but gave back no image, as if it bent the reflection inward. Boone reached for it. Rowe stopped him. The Brotherhood scrolls had warned. Contact disrupts the echo. Echo invites the gate. They weren't alone. The chamber's acoustics made it hard to tell where the sound came from. But it was there. Breathing. Slow, ragged breathing. Not theirs. And then they saw the marks on the wall. Hands. Human-sized. Charred into the stone, as if people had once tried to climb out or claw their way in. They retreated, but not before Rowe noticed one last thing. An inscription beneath the pedestal. Written in Latin and faint Old English. Here lies what was taken across oceans, across empires. The memory of a war never recorded, by victors never born. Boone photographed it, and in that moment, the chamber vibrated. Just slightly, but enough to make dust fall from the ceiling and water trickle from the far end. Something had awakened. They reached the surface just after dawn. Rowe's hands wouldn't stop shaking. Boone remained silent for hours. Rowe later reviewed Boone's photos. One image, the pedestal close-up, contained something unexpected. Reflected faintly, impossibly, was not their own silhouettes, but a third figure. Cloaked, tall, faceless. They had not been alone, and the door had not been closed. In the weeks following their return from Threshold Delta, Dr. Marian Rowe stopped giving interviews. Caleb Boone left town without explanation. Something had changed. Something had followed. Rowe's research shifted to a lesser-known structure she found in one of Boone's scanned scrolls, a Southern Eye post, once used by the Brotherhood without colors, referred to only as the Watchtower. Built in 1851 and abandoned after the Civil War, it stood like a sentinel over Georgia's highlands. Rowe's notes suggested it was never meant for defense. It was meant for observation, not of people, but of timing. A message encoded in a letter from 1865 hinted that the spiral breathes when the tower speaks. It was a line no one had ever explained. Rowe climbed the tower alone. It creaked with every step. No record of it remained in the state's architectural logs, though satellite images proved its existence. At the summit, she found a chamber lined with writing. Not graffiti, deliberate inscriptions. Coordinates, astronomical symbols, phases of the moon. And at the center, a slit in the stone facing northeast, carved precisely to align with the spring equinox. Rowe's heart pounded. This wasn't just a lookout. It was a calendar. Rowe photographed everything, then descended into the cellar, if there was one. The ground beneath the tower revealed a hatch under crumbled boards, rusted but intact. Inside, a ledger sealed in wax. Yellowed pages. A name she recognized, Colonel E.W. Talcott, a Union officer who was later court-martialed for abandoning a post without reason. The ledger was addressed to someone named the Last Watchman. Talcott's entries were unnerving. I stood in the spiral's eye. It spun, but I did not fall. I heard voices, but they were not my voice. The stars we charted are not alone, and time is only honored by those who do not live in it. He wrote of breaches, moments when the spiral opened unbidden, usually near military events or natural disasters. He recorded one in 1863 during a thunderstorm near the very tower Rowe stood in. His sketch showed a figure hovering above the spiral, faceless, watching. One entry chilled Rowe the most. When the door opens, it is not a portal. It is a correction. What lives beneath the gate is not sleeping. It is holding its breath. This was no longer about secrets hidden during the Civil War. This was a containment system, ancient, reinterpreted by the Brotherhood, and passed from war to war. And now, its keepers were nearly all gone. Rowe reached out to Boone again, no reply. She returned to Threshold Delta briefly, only to find the site under lockdown by a private security firm. No logos, no names, just fences, cameras, and silence. Back in her apartment, Rowe found a package she didn't expect. Inside, no return address, was a single item, a watch. It wasn't ticking, it wasn't wound, but it showed the exact time her motion sensors had activated weeks earlier at Threshold Delta, 2:17 a.m. Etched on the back, in Latin, Spatium Vigilat. The space watches. It wasn't just space the Brotherhood protected. It was chronology itself. Talcott's final letter in the journal said this: should the spiral fail, find the mirror. Should the mirror crack, find the twin. Should the twin rise, bury the gate. We are not their creators, only their delay. Rowe didn't understand it all. Not yet. But she knew something was coming. And she wasn't the only one who knew. Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson, a symbol of enlightenment, of philosophy, of the American experiment. But what if Jefferson's greatest contribution wasn't written in ink, but buried beneath the soil? In a private letter never intended for publication, recently unsealed through a family estate dispute, Jefferson wrote, "I have seen the mirror, and though its surface reflects nothing of this earth, it burns with memory not yet lived. What comes through it is not light, it is arrangement." The letter bore no signature, no recipient, but beneath the ink, the spiral. Dr. Marian Rowe had followed this letter to Monticello, but she wasn't the first. Caleb Boone had once mentioned the Eastern Vault, suggesting the founders may have known of the spiral's origins long before the Civil War. According to Boone's notes, left anonymously in Rowe's mailbox, The vault could be accessed through the original wine cellar, long sealed during renovations. And beneath that, a tunnel. Rowe obtained access under the guise of architectural preservation. She descended past brick and bone, into chambers Jefferson himself never disclosed. There, behind a false wall, was a staircase. And at the bottom, a door made not of wood or iron, but something else. Mirror-like, silent, and cold. The mirror was not a metaphor. It was real. Rowe reached out. Her fingers hovered inches from its surface, which shimmered, not with her reflection, but with a landscape not her own. Rolling dunes, black sky, and a tower, floating. She pulled away. The vision dissolved. Her camera recorded nothing. But when she closed her eyes, the image remained. Inside a sealed box near the vault entrance, Rowe discovered blueprints. Not of buildings, but geometry. A tetrahedron labeled Sequence 1. A sphere, memory. A twisted spiral, correction. And beneath them all, Jefferson's hand again. The mind cannot contain what the spiral rearranges. But the gate remembers. This wasn't science. This was intentional design, built for containment, activation, or worse. Further in, Rowe discovered a chamber lined with stone panels. On each, carvings of battles, but not from history. Not Gettysburg. Not Yorktown. These were otherworldly skirmishes, soldiers in 18th century garb fighting creatures made of shadow and wire. Jefferson had chronicled a war he never lived. Or maybe he did, just not in our timeline. One mural showed a familiar shape, the mirror, shattered. From its core spilled light? No. Memory. Crowds of people weeping, others standing frozen. One man, drawn again and again, a hooded figure with a cracked spiral on his chest. The inscription read, "Only the reflection remains." Rowe documented everything, but the light began to dim. Her lantern flickered. Her breath felt thick. She wasn't alone anymore. A faint hum began, vibrations in her spine, a noise too low to hear, only to feel. And then, a hand, not touching, not visible, but present. Behind her, the mirror began to glow. She ran. She didn't remember the climb, didn't remember sealing the wall behind her. Outside, dawn had broken, but in the reflection of her phone screen, the mirror was still visible, even hundreds of feet away, even with her eyes closed. She knew now. Jefferson hadn't built Monticello atop philosophy. He had built it atop containment. The mirror wasn't a gate. It was a lens. And something aware, had just looked back. The mirror under Monticello had shown Marian Rowe more than she was ready to understand. She returned home changed, not just shaken, but rewired. That night, she didn't sleep. Not because she feared what was behind the mirror, but because she had begun to dream in spirals. Always two spirals, spinning in opposite directions. One clockwise, one counter, both converging toward the same impossible center. Boone had called it the twin spiral protocol, a term mentioned only once in all of his notes. No context, no explanation, just one phrase beside it. If one spiral opens, the other must seal. Rowe followed Boone's last known location, Fort Ransom, a Civil War-era military installation decommissioned in 1883. According to reclassified Army logs, the site had been quietly resecured by a private historical foundation in 1997, one linked to no known donors. She posed as a documentarian and received temporary access. What she found wasn't a ruin. It was a mask. The above-ground fort was crumbling, but beneath it lay steel doors, digital locks, modern infrastructure, and dustless hallways. Someone had been here recently. Below the fort, she found an archive. Inside, reels of microfilm, scanned letters, documents from the 1940s labeled with both the spiral and a second symbol, a split circle. She found references to MSS Protocol Delta, a Cold War-era continuation of the Brotherhood's mission. Not governmental, not even Black Ops, something between. And in a folder marked TS Delta, the twin spiral is not balance. It is a reset, a kill switch encoded in space itself. Rowe began to realize the Brotherhood hadn't just kept gates closed. They had designed a system, across centuries, to collapse them if ever opened. Talcott had hinted at this. Jefferson had known. The spiral was a gateway. The twin spiral was a circuit breaker. And somewhere, hidden deep in the Carolinas, was a reactor. Not nuclear, not mechanical, but ritual. A convergence site. She found the convergence site. just inland from the coast. A barn, ordinary from the outside, but inside, a shaft beneath trapdoors, descending into a hexagonal chamber with mirrors, coils, and scorch markings. Someone had tried to activate the protocol once, and failed. What happened next was in the final folder Boone had ever written. A voice recording. Scratchy, barely audible. Can't reverse it. It saw us. We were reflected before we were ready. The other spiral, it spun backward. That's not containment. That's erasure. The theory was terrifying. When one spiral activates, reality distorts, gently at first. But if both spirals activate simultaneously, they cancel not just the gate, but the context around it. Memories, structures, people, erased, not destroyed, forgotten, never having been. Boone had written one final line in his notes. If we forget them, they win. Rowe fled the site. But as she did, her phone buzzed. One message, from a number that didn't exist. Delta Zero breached. Final watchman recalled. Monticello awaits. Her blood ran cold. She looked up. The sky above Fort Ransom had begun to swirl, faint spiral clouds, too perfect to be weather. It had begun again. Not the war, not the reflection, but the convergence. Monticello. Again. But this time, not for discovery. For closure. Or erasure. Dr. Marian Rowe returned under cover of storm. Not metaphor, but fact. Thunder cracked the sky above Virginia as she crossed the threshold of the estate. In her coat pocket, the map Boone had marked Delta Zero. In her mind, the spirals, still spinning, still converging, still remembering. The mirror door was no longer dormant. Its surface rippled gently, as if anticipating her touch. But Rowe did not approach it directly. She inserted the key, the one Boone had left in the code of the unnamed soldier, into a panel on the side wall. The wall split open. Behind it, another chamber. This one round. 12 pillars. 12 symbols. Each glowing faintly. Rowe stepped onto the central platform. She placed both hands on the spiral. The room responded, not with noise, but with memory. She saw Jefferson, Boone, Talcott, the Brotherhood, but not as ghosts, as memories preserved by the pattern itself. Each had triggered a phase. Each had left a fragment. And now, in her, the final watchman, those fragments began to coalesce. Jefferson's voice echoed first. It is not the machine we fear. It is the mind that wakes from it. Then Talcott. If you remember the spiral, you anchor it. You stop it. Rowe's breathing slowed. The twin spirals were aligning. Delta Zero had not been breached. Delta Zero was her. The reset protocol wasn't a bomb. It was a filter. A last test. Who remembers? Who still holds the pattern? Who anchors the world? Rowe reached into her bag and placed Boone's watch on the platform. 2:17 a.m. Time collapsed inward. The mirror behind her fractured, not broken, but split into reflections, each one showing a different world. A battlefield with no soldiers. A tower floating in space. A version of herself, not a scholar, but a soldier. And behind them all, the spiral, always spinning. She whispered, anchor held, and pressed her palm to the final glyph. The light faded. Rowe awoke hours later. Alone. No chamber. No mirror. No spiral. She lay outside Monticello. Sunrise on her face. Birdsong in the air. History had resumed. But something was different. No records existed of Caleb Boone. No Fort Ransom. No spiral engravings. All her photos were gone. Her backups, blank. And yet, she remembered everything. In her pocket, one item remained. The watch. Still ticking. Still frozen at 2:17 a.m. She smiled. Not because it was over, but because it wasn't. The Brotherhood had always worked in silence. In fragments. In those who chose to remember. History, she realized, is not written by the victors. It's written by the anchors. The watchmen. And as long as she remembered, the spiral remembered her.